All right, this one's priceless. Scott Jennings set this panel on fire with a single sentence, putting former MSNBC host Tiffany Cross back in her place. But watch the build-up to that because you'll realize how out of touch she really sounds on trade, tariffs, Americans' dangerous dependency on China, and much more.
And the trade, honestly, the trade is asymmetrical.
And who voted for Donald Trump?
Precisely. Trade is asymmetrical with China. We imported over 439 billion products from China. We exported over 140 billion from China. Their own foreign ministry has said, we will not flinch. We will not genuflect to a bullying government. I respectfully disagree.
You, though, Tiffany, that we rely so much on an adversary to make most of our goods?
Listen, whether it bothers me or not is irrelevant. I'm dealing with reality.
Important, though.
It is important, but this is what it is.
Why does it have to be the reality that we are dependent on so many things to come out of our biggest adversary in the world? They are the enemy, and we should not be dependent on them.
But no, they are not our enemy. They're our biggest trading partner. And if we
they've got rare earth minerals and you don't.
They're the enemy.
Right. But listen, but like it or not, sure, Michael, they are our biggest trading partner. And if we were to manufacture iPhones here, iPhones would cost $3,500. The American people are not going to tolerate that. We have one of the highest standards of working conditions here. I don't think that we can say, forget you, China. They
so it's
literally.
Okay. So you're okay. Hold on, sure, Michael. So you're okay. You're okay if we continue to put our own economic and national security future in the hands of our biggest enemy because effectively they use slave labor to build stuff, and that makes it better for us? That is terrible.
I am 100% not okay with that, but I'm dealing in the reality of what is.
Do you want to change it?
But we need to.
I absolutely want to change it. I don't know that changing it means isolating us on the global stage.
Here's what this mindset exposes from Tiffany. It is a rule baked into global economics of our time that the behemoth of the U.S. economy can simply not be ignored. With the dollar as the world reserve currency, the only way other countries will have access to this vital reserve is dealing with the United States and its vast and wealthy marketplace for their own good. That's a fact that's not going away, at least anytime soon, and it's incredible that Tiffany believes tariffs are enough to flip the table of the world economy and isolate the US when they are actually the most effective tool for renegotiation. By the way, we're speaking the hard facts that you won't see on the mainstream media, so please be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to never miss out. And honestly, I think you realize just how short-sighted Tiffany Cross's geopolitical view really is when she doesn't even think China's an adversary, despite the fact that most analysts predict some kind of direct conflict between the US and China until the year 2100. We have to start preparing for that now, but watch how this conversation spilled beyond that next.
It's a colonizer's attitude to say, I like it, I'm just going to steal it. Now, the fact of the matter is, in this new land, you cannot just go and say, I like it, it's mine now. It doesn't work that way. Well, that is what they're trying to do. And in this new world order, yeah, absolutely. When they're looking at Greenland and say, I like it, I want to take it for mine, that is a very colonizer attitude.
I have never ever said we're going to go to Greenland and, quote, colonize it or steal it.
You're not a member of government, so you're irrelevant at that point. I'm talking about the president of the United States doing that.
You got fired from your job.
You can agitate.
If you want to engage in personal insults,
I don't, but you do.
What you lack in a legitimate point, you make up for in personal insults.
I don't. You do.
Personal insults. The point I am making is in this new world order, we are looking at countries, whether or not they're an adversary or ally, it is being determined on what kind of deal we can get. And we cannot govern, we cannot legislate that way. We are increasingly isolated on the world stage.
No, we're not.
So if you want to engage in personal insults,
we're not
if
isolated.
I were you, I would reserve that for your party, who is increasingly isolated. This our position outside of
personal insult? Talk about playing the victim card when she's the one that called him irrelevant to begin with. Tiffany Cross was fired from MSNBC around 2 years ago for alleged bad behavior and foul language on and off the air, and her foray into online media has been struggling ever since, with a podcast that struggles to gain any traction, to be frank. But while that's not the point of this exchange, discrediting Scott's very valid point by saying he's not in the government shows you the kind of false credentialism that she brings to this debate. Thankfully, there was someone else on this panel making some sense when political strategist Sir Michael Singleton set the record straight for just how dangerously dependent the U.S. economy has become.
If we ever have a military conflict with China, and they say, you know what, we're going to put an embargo on anything shipping to the United States. We're going to stop everything. What happens then?
Don't you think
I think we're looking at that
because we would want to have friends?
Not China.
No, I'm saying allies, not the ones that, like people that we put tariffs on in the last week, wouldn't you think that what we would want is to build trading relationships with people who like us?
Fair trade relationships that benefit the United States and not our friends. That's not a good friendship. That's an abusive relationship.
Fairer relationships with people who are our friends. Wouldn't that be the right strategy?
I would agree with fair.
But what happened over the last week was not that. What happened over the last week was that we said we're going to treat Britain and France and the EU like China. We're going to just take the same formula we use for China and slap it on our friends. Does that make any sense to you?
What makes sense to me is to decrease the trade issues that we have with other countries. I think that makes sense. It doesn't make sense to me that our friends across the globe have a benefit to trading with the United States and American workers do not.
It's incredible, at least to me, that the same people screaming about wanting to slow down this rebalancing of trade relations just don't realize that it's exactly this kind of silent complacency over decades that has landed us in this place. Remember, Donald Trump has around 2 years before the midterms where he's at least sure of a majority in the House and Senate, and that means the clock is ticking if he wants to put this reverse gear on decades of completely bad policy, as well as set a solid foundation for the new technologies that are going to rule the future. That does include AI revolution, which is dangerously vulnerable since the nation of Taiwan, which is the semiconductor hub of the world, lies just a few miles off the Chinese mainland and is claimed by the CCP as their territory. The electric vehicle revolution relies on lithium and rare earth minerals owned in large part by Chinese firms in Africa. These are areas where the CCP knows it has a potential chokehold on the US in any future conflict, and that's the perspective you need to understand what's going on. But it seems like not everyone on this panel understands that, which is evident by how Ana Navarro went off into a predictable tangent, calling Trump a dictator.
I speak to a lot of Europeans, I speak to a lot of Panamanians, I speak to a lot of Central Americans, and they think, I'll tell you what they think. They think he's acting like a dictator. They think he's acting a lot like Ortega in Nicaragua, a lot like Maduro in Venezuela, a lot like they act in Cuba.
Are they serious when they say that?
Oh, no.
Yes.
By the
dictatorship?
Way, yes. Attacks on the free press.
I was in Brussels last week.
Wanting to stay in power.
Hang on, guys.
We're not even close to dictatorship in the United States.
In the United States?
Did you see what he did today? Hang on one second. One at a time, please.
Who defended the 2020 election results, who worked for him, asked for the DOJ to investigate him. That's what dictators do.
We're going to get to that later. We're going to get to that later.
People believe that we live in a dictatorship in America?
I lived in one.
And I know you have.
Okay,
so you should know better than to say that we live in a dictatorship in the United States of America.
They censor the press, like he just did with the AP.
Okay.
So they do not listen to judicial orders like he hasn't done.
Hey, hold on, Chair Michael. Hold on. Let me let Richard, because he introduced this point and didn't finish the point you were trying to say. What are they saying overseas?
It is incredible that these are still the petty debates that occupy such a significant portion of the political discourse on the mainstream media. And perhaps it's just more of the same that has landed us in this spot to begin with. Right now, the tariffs have already got the rest of the world on the negotiating table, except China, which knows it has a lot more to lose with a restructuring of the status quo. But you let me know in the comments what you think and share this with the people that have an important voice to add to this debate. We're keeping an eye out for developments because I think that we're going to find out the answers to these questions in the next few weeks and months.